This is The Clash, where the real world clashes with a true Christian worldview. Join former professional wrestler Chris Whaley, known as the Masked Saint, who is an author, pastor, and teacher that brings his wrestling skills into the squared circle and tackles real-life issues. Along with Jeff Dixon, best-selling author, internationally known teacher, leader, and pastor who is not afraid to tackle the tough issues of the world we live in. Together they form a tag team of wisdom in The Clash.
Hi, welcome to The Clash, where we take a Christian worldview and allow it to clash, if you will, with the culture around us. And we try to come up with some thoughts, some ideas, some things that will encourage you and share stories of faith. I'm Jeff Dixon. I'm joined by my co-host, former professional wrestler, also known as the Saint, Chris Whaley.
Yeah, that's about the best you could come up with today.
Well, the Saint. I mean, I don't want to pick on you. I mean, I can talk about your hat, but I'm not going to do that.
Okay, all right. Well, I have got a guest first today.
I know you do. So I'm excited. I want to. They don't need to hear us. Let's get to the guest.
One of the great things about this, when I was in professional wrestling, I just didn't know any Christian wrestlers. I mean, my last 3 years in Fort Worth, there were some folks that were supposed to be Christian, but I didn't see that in the locker room. My good friend Tom Jones, one of the first African Americans professional wrestlers, Tom Jones, I got him going to church with me. Tom was running the gym there in the stockyards in Fort Worth for Wild West Wrestling, Ken Mantell. And I made a good impact upon Tom, and I really believe that when he, graduated from this life, that he knew the Lord. But besides that, Jeff, I think the man that we have on today is really the first professional wrestler that I know of that just, put it out there that he was a Jesus person. And that is the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. And we are so grateful to have you on today, Ted. Thank you for being here. And
well, I mean, thanks for inviting me, gang. I'm more than happy to share my faith with you. That's for sure.
Well, I'm not going to be greedy, Jeff, so I'm going to let you go first.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, Ted, again, I'm a longtime fan. So as I told you before we started recording here, I've seen you in person before. So I'm sure I rooted against you when I saw you. I don't remember that part of it real well because when you were such a great character as a bad guy, but also at the same time, I mean, you were main eventing so many different shows. But how in the world did you move to the point where you came? I guess what I'm asking is, what's your journey of faith? How did you get to the point where you said, you know what, I'm ready to ask Jesus into my life, and I need to become a follower of this person called Jesus?
Well, let's go back to the beginning. And I was, I have two brothers, and we all have the same mother, and each have a different father. My mother married a wrestler when she was very young, and my older brother, whose name at birth was Albert, changed it to Mike because, again, and then my mother divorced this guy. And he was running around with what wrestlers do. And then I don't know how she really met my biological father, but my biological father's name was Ted Wills, and he was a professional singer. He was a regular on the old Tennessee Ernie Ford show, and probably the most beautiful bass voice that you ever heard. And what was really and his mother, I wasn't around her very much, but the one thing, I don't know why I remember it, was that she was very much a Christian and very much about God. And so anyway, so then my mother, there's a lot of guys that say, well, my dad was a wrestler too. Well, both of my parents were. My mother became a lady wrestler, and I can't remember what year, but that's how she met my, the man whose name I carry today. Mike DiBiase was the son of Italian immigrants, born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. And I'm trying to think where they met. Well, here's the thing: wherever they met, what they found out is they're both from Omaha, Nebraska. They both went to the same grade school, and basically lived maybe I don't know, a mile apart, in this big neighborhood, and I never knew it. Again, Mike was, and I think he was, I don't know, I would say he's probably 6 or 7 years older than my mother. But I can't, and I'm not sure just where they met, but I mean, they met because they were both, he was wrestling and she was wrestling. And so when we went to Omaha, I mean, again, wrestling was very regional. You moved around a lot back then. You would go to a different territory, so to speak. And, uh, but Omaha was home. Omaha's where we had a house, and we lived in this basically Italian neighborhood. And I was raised Roman Catholic, and I was a very serious Catholic. It's kind of like when I was an altar boy, like in the dead of the winter, it's I, it snows a lot in Nebraska. So, I wake up in the morning and there's 4 feet of snow on the ground, and I'm supposed to be the altar boy at the 6 o'clock mass. Well, I got up and I went, and what's crazy about that, I said, is like, I got up and I trudged through the snow to be there, and of course the priest is there, but he lives there because this Catholic church is attached to the building where the what do they call that, the rectory, where the priests live. And but that's how serious I was about it when I was a kid. And so much so that when and then we went to Texas. We came back, and I went to the 7th, 8th, and 9th grade in Omaha. And my 9th grade year, which would be a freshman in high school, I went to a school called Omaha Creighton Prep. Well, I think Creighton University is pretty well known for they have some pretty good basketball teams, but Creighton Prep was an all-boy Catholic high school. No girls, no girls, no distraction, and so they were always high in the rankings. And so my freshman football team, we had 6 games, and we went 6-0, and we were the third team the third freshman team in a row to do that. So it was anyway. Uh, when my dad saw that I had some football talent, his thought was, I'm going to call and see if I can go back to Amarillo, Texas, which was the base for another territory. And because he always did very well there. He had very good personal relationship with the guy who was the booker and basically owned it, a guy named Dory Funk. And so he said, we'll go back and put Teddy, me being Teddy, in a good Texas high school football program and see where it goes. Because Texas is notorious for having great high school football programs. Over half of the people that you see go out of high school into college to play football, a bunch of them come out of Texas. So that was what my dad was thinking. And he says, I'll wrestle, for 3 more years and retire. And he was 45. And this is the summer of '69. And I had completed my freshman year of high school. And so we go to Amarillo, and the family who ran the Amarillo territory was a family by the name of Funk, Dory Funk. And Dory had 2 sons, Dory Jr. and Terry. And but my dad and Dory Funk Sr. had this great relationship. And they're on record. They had the longest professional wrestling match in history, 3 hours and 15 minutes.
Wow.
Anyway, they had this match and it was unbelievable. And then we moved to a new apartment complex, and my dad, he said goodbye. He said, I'm going to Lubbock. That was another. Lubbock was about 100 miles from Amarillo, and I went with a friend of mine from grade school when I had gone to grade school there before to a baseball game, and I come home and I go upstairs. I'm not home for 5 minutes, and there's a knock on the door, and it's one of the wrestlers' wives. She says, Ted, where's your mom? And I said, well, she said, I think she's asleep. He says, go wake her up. And I said, what's wrong? She says, just go wake her up. So I went and woke my mom up and told her that that I think her name was Betty was there. And I can remember she took me out in the hall and she put me against the wall. And she said, Teddy, she said, your dad had a heart attack tonight in the ring and he's dead. Wow. I mean, I'll never forget that picture as long as I live. And so now, and my mother was just hysterical. We are forced then to leave Amarillo because Mike dies, and we go back to this little town in southern Arizona where my mother's parents lived, where my grandparents lived, where my mother's mother, owned a truck stop cafe. And she originally was from Omaha as well, and her name was Marie Nevins. And so we went back to this little town, Wilcox, Arizona. And so, I'm forced to go back there and go, what's going to happen to me? And I know that my dad was concerned about my mom. He was afraid that she was starting to drink, and when he died, she went she just went berserk. My grandmother calls my biological father, Ted Wills, and told him, your ex-wife is drinking herself to death, and your son needs a father. So Ted comes on the scene, and he and my mother strike up a new relationship, which was just, I couldn't believe that. And so they and my younger brother, who was Mike's child by my mother, they go to California. I don't go with them. I stayed with my grandmother. I had already played football one season, and that's my hope. My hope was that somebody would see me and I'd get a scholarship to play college football. But throughout this time, I'm a Catholic, and I was a very devout Catholic. I remember one summer, I can't remember what it was. It was like this pilgrimage thing where you went for like 3 straight weeks every day, and I did it. And I would walk to it, and I would come back. And I was the altar boy. I was the award-winning altar boy. I was the altar boy who showed up when there was 3 feet of snow on the ground and there wasn't anybody in the church but me and the priest. That's how serious I was about my faith at that time. But again, it's Catholicism. Now, I'm a strong Christian today, but I'm not a Catholic. As I grew older and I began to study things, I began to understand. I began to understand the Protestant movement and why it happened. So, I went through good times and bad times.
Jeff, did you ever, in your wildest imagination, think that one day we would have this great TV show called The Clash, and you could actually buy T-shirts and stuff that had The Clash on? Did you ever think that possible?
Yeah, when I was 3 years old, I had a vision.
You did?
That was going to happen one day. No, I'm just kidding. I never thought about that. So.
Hey, it's just awesome, man. Of course, the tagline, don't tap out.
Yeah.
On the hat,
Look at that.
yeah.
You wear
And
it
then
on your
on the
head.
back of the hat, it's got the Clash. And I don't know what you got.
Well, I've been sitting around thinking about, how could you think about the Clash 24 hours a day and at the same time hydrate?
Oh, wow.
This cup right there, look at there.
How awesome
Now,
is that?
that's a mini tumbler right there.
Wow.
But you could get a coffee cup.
You know what? I need to get one of those to pour the coffee into it so it keeps it.
You also could get a mug though. If you're a mug guy, you can get a mug.
Yeah.
You get a big taller tumbler you can walk around. And so when you're walking around drinking stuff with our logo on it, people say, "What is the Clash?" And they can tell you all about the TV show.
So you need to look at that little QR code down at the bottom of your screen, and you just get your camera, your phone out, you put it on camera, and you look at that, and a little thing will come up, and you touch that, takes you right to the store. It's so easy, even I can do it.
There you go.
Jeff, do you remember the first Bible verse you memorized?
I do. I have sometimes trouble remembering the address of it, but it's John 11:35. Jesus wept. Now, when I was a kid, they were having a contest, and the goal was go home this week and come back and memorize a Bible verse. I'm a practical kid, right? I'm like, okay, what's the shortest verse I can find in the Bible? And sure enough, 2 words, Jesus wept. Fantastic, I'm on it. And so that was the first verse I ever memorized. And other people memorized John 3:16. I mean, and they were doing great stuff. But me, I just kept it simple. But I found out over time, though, that in those 2 words, I have discovered so much about Jesus and the way that he connects to us, the way he feels about us, the way he feels our pain, meets us at our point of need, his compassion and caring. It's really all wrapped up in those 2 words. And so for me, although it's silly, it's also the first verse I ever remember as a kid.
I finished high school in this little town, and of Wilcox. Well, I'm watching TV one day. Wrestling comes on. I hadn't seen any professional wrestling since I was 15 years old, and now I'm just about to graduate from high school. So I recognize it's the Funk family, and they're bringing their show to Tucson. They were kind of experimenting as to whether they could branch out or not. So I go see them, and I had already signed a scholarship, a letter of intent to play at Arizona, but that was a letter of intent to that what do you call it? It wasn't. There's a regional letter of intent and the national letter. And once you send the national letter of intent, you're committed. So I talked to the Funks, and they, just 2 of them were there, and the one that I knew the best and had the most respect for was Terry. He wasn't there. He came the next time, and I went back to see him. And it was I think it was like 3 weeks later, and he said, "Teddy," he says, "you know what?" He says, "I can arrange a recruiting trip for you to West Texas State, which is a college between Amarillo and Canyon, Texas." And he said, "Even if you've decided you're going to go to Arizona, great. But," he says, "if you take the recruiting trip, the recruiting trip's free. It's an opportunity for you to come back and say hello and just see everybody." Well, that's all it took. And I tell people to this day, I said, a lot of people think, why would I pass up a scholarship at the University of Arizona to play for a smaller school at West Texas State? I tell them, I said, well, I really didn't go back to Texas to play football. I went back to Texas because I knew it was my inroad to professional wrestling and my relationship with that family. And so I played there for 3 years. And like I said, the summer between my junior and senior year, I had the opportunity to actually start wrestling. I was gonna try it on for the summer, and see if I really wanted to do it. Well, when the summer was over, I didn't go back. I had 1 year of college left. Now I'm 71 years old, and as I look at myself in the mirror, I it's like, you idiot, you only had a year left. Yeah, you should have gone back
And
and
you had a summer
finished.
job that never ended.
Yeah, I'm telling you, but by the grace of God, I never needed to have that or use that college education. And because, I started in the business in the Mid-South, which the Mid-South territory was huge. It was all of Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi. It was a big territory. And so that's where I started. And again, Terry Funk's wife was very upset with me about not going back to school. I can remember that. Yeah, idiot, you only have 1 year left. Come on, what are you doing? And now I agree with her. But at that time, no. Anyway, so that's how it all got started. And I looked up to my dad. And I'll be honest with you, the one thing that he and my mother didn't want me to do is be a professional wrestler. And I was always like, why? And he says, it's just such a hard lifestyle. But I was bound and determined. And, by the grace of God, it worked out well for me. Now, again, this is where I started to fall away. You know, up until that time, I had been a devout Catholic, and even when I was, at West Texas State, I tried to go to church as much as I could, and I married my first wife there, and my first wife was a girl who I had known back when I was in the 6th grade going to school there. And she and her sister lived with their mother in the same apartment complex where my mom and dad and I lived. And so, I'm just walking through this, mall one day, and I walk in this store, and there she is. I said, "Oh my God!" Her name was Jeanette, and so we went out and had coffee, and started reminiscing about way back when. And long story short, we ended up getting married. I was 20 years old the first time I got married. Gentlemen, how many 20-year-old males do you know that are mature enough to get married? I don't know any.
No.
I got married when I was 20.
And I certainly, found out that I wasn't.
Yeah.
There was, you know, it didn't work, and I thought it would. And there was infidelity. Um, it's kind of like wrestlers are kind of like rock stars. This the next town, the next show, the next party, the next girl. And I won't say that that's what became of me right away, but I eventually got there where that was me. And um, Jeanette and I divorced. My first son, Michael, was from that marriage. And, but my wrestling career was taking off. I was becoming known, and I was climbing the ladder, so to speak. And, when I went to work with Bill Watts in what was the Mid-South territory, that's where I really started to learn, and was able to I don't know, I can't, it's hard to explain. You go territory to territory, and I started in Amarillo. I actually went to New York for a very short time. I went back to Mid-South, which was Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and then I went to Atlanta. I remember one of the Funks called me and said, "Ted, get to Atlanta, get on the TV show, and get over." Atlanta was the first TBS, Ted Turner's Superstation, and he says, "Go get on that TV," and that's what I did. And it was while I was in Atlanta that I met Melanie, uh, my wife to this day, and that was yeah, I wouldn't say it was love at first sight, so to speak, but um, anyway, we met, and as we got to know each other, we became very close, um, and then it came time for me to move again because Atlanta as a territory and wrestling was not doing well. But every time I went back to work for Bill Watts in Mid-South, I did good. So, and it's the first time I had ever rented an apartment and bought furniture. Like, what are you doing buying furniture?
Putting down roots, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Melanie, my wife, she helps me, load up this, rental truck, and I drive the truck, and she drove my car, and followed me to Baton Rouge, and but again, I'm, you know, the guy that ran the gym where I worked out, his name was Foxy Denham, and Melanie started going to a Bible study at his house. And Foxy called me in his office one day and he said, Teddy, said, you were in love with Melanie? And I said, yeah. I said, I would never ask anybody to quit school and move in with me if I wasn't in love with them. And he said, so why aren't you married? It's kind of like, I want to be sure and I want her to be sure. And he goes, well, your thinking is good. He says, but here's the bottom line. You're living in sin. Bang, right between the eyes. And I couldn't deny it. And so I said, okay. And so I went back and spoke with Mel, and we got married on New Year's Eve of 1981. And we got married at Foxy Denham's house. And that was the beginning of our relationship together. And, I wasn't very popular with Melanie's parents at first. It's like, their daughter, quits school and then goes to live with her boyfriend. That didn't sit well with them. But over time, and as I got to know them, they got to know me. They realized that I really loved their daughter. And but the wrestling world is what it is, and it's it's kind of a rock star lifestyle, and it's kind of like what's it saying? You are what you behold.
Yeah.
If you behold something long enough, that's what you're going to become. And
Hi, I want you to know I am thrilled to death that we're getting to share this interview with Ted DiBiase with you. These $1 million confessions are just that, a life, a career. It's absolutely amazing, and we have a lot more we want to talk about in our next episode.
Yeah, this is the $1 million testimony, but the next one's going to be the $1 million legacy. And we're going to have a great more 30 minutes with the $1 million man, Ted DiBiase. This is a great time to get. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Did you have a good time with him?
Yeah, he's a legend. Yes.
Yeah, he is. Well, I hope you learned some things too. And you just need to remember those things as you go through life this week. And remember this, don't tap out.